Hello, welcome back to the Hack Attack. I'll never get sick of that rhyming, ever. I'll never get sick of it.
No.
It's so good.
We got to keep it going.
So,
I hope you got a snack
I did,
during that break.
I did. I got a snack for the Hack Attack.
You won't catch any flack.
Get out of here. Yeah, it's always interesting taking a break on these shows because it's basically 5 minutes of chat just being like, either you should just play this game. This game is already that game. Or stop ruining the game you're playing.
Yeah, exactly.
Which I like.
Yeah.
Stop it. Or like actual like legit people being like, this is really interesting. Whatever it is you come up with, I'm sure is like going to be good. But I do like that. So folks who think that they have a game that will do this already, I don't want to sound like a snob, but I probably already have seen or read about it. Like, I spend a lot of time reading about and reading role-playing games. Like Fate was brought up as an example. Way too pulpy for what we're trying to do. And also, not really a game that I like very much, in my experience. Like, there's lots of systems. Someone pointed out on the break that there's actually a lot of games that kind of get sort of close to what we're trying to do, but none of them quite do. And plus, also, Steve and I are game designers, so we like doing this stuff. It's
This is
almost
fun.
like, yeah, more fun to just make a new game or like cut up a game hard enough that it's not the same game anymore. It's as much just about the experience of talking about games and trying to pick them apart as it is about like succeeding at, doing the thing we're trying to do.
Well, it definitely, like, just talking about it helps me at least get a much better understanding of what the problems I'm trying to wrestle with are.
Mm-hmm.
And then, like, that helps me come up with more interesting solutions. I mean, like, it's possible that we start talking about a game and I have these problems, but then the answer is something that fits fairly simply within the solution, not the solution, within the system we're already using.
Yeah.
Like, the hack to inspiration was actually quite elegant and fit very well.
Yeah, I mean, there's little hacks and there's big hacks and there's throw the game out the window hacks because, I mean, some games are like that. And we don't know when we start, like, what kind of hack it'll be. Like, when I started with Shadowrun, I did a little one-man hack attack where I was like, okay, cool, I'm going to change the reward structure to make the game more character-driven. And it worked. It worked great. That was a perfect hack. However,
It just so happened.
it worked too well, and the rest of the game does not fit the game that we're playing. Like, we're playing the beliefs, instincts, and goals game, and we're playing the MVP whatever game, but the rest of the game is sort of fallen behind and now also needs hacking. So what I wanted to talk about, just as like a preliminary thing that we can kind of try to maybe do, is like streamlining, right? And talk about when we get into a situation. So there's basically two kinds of situations in Shadowrun First Edition. There's ones that can be resolved with a single roll. So like tasks you can resolve by just rolling a skill and moving on. And then there's combat and decking, right? Because combat and decking have their own entirely divided subsystem built up of several dozen rolls or more to get you from point A to point B. And again, like, people are gonna give me shit because I always talk about Burning Wheel, but Burning Wheel does a similar thing inversely by saying you only ever resolve combat, big combat with range and cover or fight, when it matters, when it's a belief-based combat. Everywhere else, it's either a roll or an opposed roll, right? Like, if it's just Crusher trying to kill a goon, I shouldn't use the whole combat system necessarily, but the game doesn't support that. And in fact, hinders players. Like, I feel, okay, so secret GM guilt feelings here. I feel really bad because Wheat and and I have talked about this. We had a conversation about it at TwitchCon. We've talked about this where he's like, okay, man, so I have this like cyber deck with all these like cool abilities and like but I always just make computer rolls. Like, I wanna have decking combat. I wanna fight another decker in like the Matrix. And yeah. I'm like, I mean, combat at least we are all there for, but like
Yes.
decking is brutal. And I want to be able for that not to happen so much, right? To be able, like, because I could very easily just be like, combat, if we did this with combat, I could just be like, fuck it, I don't know, everybody pick the thing you're going to roll for combat and roll it. And if you can succeed, this happens. If you fail, this happens, and we just work out the consequences. But like, that hinders Crusher because the game, again, character creation is set on engaging with these heavy mechanical pieces, these chunks of system that are very complicated. And I don't care for them much, and I think that they're interesting, but not as much as the game gives them credit for. I think the game is like, hey, look, combat system. It's cool and interesting. I'm like, yeah, it's not as cool as you think it is, guys.
Yeah. Well, and
Sorry.
like anything, like especially decking and cyberspace work generally is what I've heard about it. Anything that takes the majority of the GM and one other person's attention while the other players are just sitting there sort of twiddling their thumbs, that's not so good and not so bueno.
Well, and so what's interesting is people say about Shadowrun, they're like, well, if you get in combat, you've already lost, right? Shadowrun's
Right.
not about combat. And I'm like, horseshit. Shadowrun's all about combat. Look at the page
The
count.
majority of the rules.
Yeah, look at the page count. That's what the game is about, right?
Yeah.
Like, if a game is 100 pages and 90 pages of those are about fighting, it's a game about fighting.
The game is about fighting.
I'm sorry, like, that's the truth. But the trick is that, like, it's not just about splitting the party, because I would, hands down, no problem. It's easy to do decking and regular fighting at the same time, because you just roll initiative and it's like, okay, Bonbon, your turn. Do a decking thing. Crusher, your turn. Shoot somebody. Jump back and forth. Like, because it's 80s cyberpunk, nothing happens at the speed of thought. It's all like real-time decking, so it's no big
Yeah.
deal.
Yeah.
But it's the problem. The problem is that there's an entirely dedicated subsystem for certain types of character that in traditional Shadowrun might not be a problem, because combat, you could be like, okay, 3 out of 5 or 4 out of 5 people in the party are good at fighting, and then there's a decker. So when you go into combat, you got 4 people who are like, fucking sweet, let's do it, guns out, spells, everything, combat, we're all really invested. But for us, combat is almost as alienating as decking, in that we really only have one combat character and one decker. So it's like,
And the other two are doing something else.
yeah, or they're just sitting there watching, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, I mean, like, Nightsass is a really super interesting character, super social, drives the social stuff in the game, but in combat, Caitlyn gets 1 turn for 3 of Crusher's turns, plus if I have cybered opponents, it's like 30 turns, and 1 of those belongs to Nightsass, 1 to Breakdown, and maybe like 2 to Bonbon, and then 4 to Crusher or whatever. You know, like, it's really unevenly balanced in the direction of certain types of skill sets, which again, initially felt like not such a big deal because we were playing Shadowrun. I thought we were kind of playing it by the book, but we've moved away from there. So now it's about these 4 characters that have very different interests, and I'd like to flatten them out. I'd like to it means either, and I already know my preference, but it means either making the social stuff as interesting as the fighting, so with some kind of like duel of wits thing, or like really like complicating like social interaction to help Nightsass have more to do. But then what we end up doing is, and if I do that for Breakdown, what we end up doing is we have 4 games that we're playing.
Yeah, there's 4 different systems and only one character engages with each of them.
Yeah, and it's like, cool, you draw a gun, well, I guess this is a Crusher game the next 4 hours.
This is a Crusher session. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Which is not, like, it runs totally counter to the idea of the game being about this team as an entity, right? Because you want people to be able to influence and, like, help each other out and, like, do things.
Yeah.
So I think the conundrum here is stripping combat down and resolving in a series of versus rolls might feel like not fair for the characters that have invested points in that, right? Because there's a bunch of different skills you can use in combat, but if you only spent, if we're like, all right, everything is a guns roll. You roll guns, they roll dodge, and whoever wins, that's it for that target, right? It's just like you get shot once. And like really dumb it down, kind of like Burning Wheel does Bloody Versus tests. We can do that, but I don't want to undermine anyone's experience as their character, right? I don't want to take away like Crusher's badassedness, right?
Yeah.
So I don't know. It's one of those things that I'm not really sure where that would be. Like where I would start would be to like find a way to make all the screen time interesting, and not have combats just feel like rolling through the same types of rolls over and over. Like let me explain a mechanism to you, Steven, and you can
please.
you can boggle along with me. Okay, so let's imagine I have a gun, right? And if I want
Imagine.
to, I want to shoot that gun at someone. I roll my gun skill. Depending on how well I do, it shows how much it hurts them, how hard they get hit.
Yeah.
In response, they roll a combination of their armor, some pool, they're like a dodge pool that they can use, like a
Yeah.
non-renewable resource, and they reduce my successes, and whatever is left, that's the wound.
Yeah.
So, like, it's a single shot, pretty straightforward, right? So,
Yeah, just a single opposed roll.
Yeah.
Blam, blam. Cool.
yeah. The game is
Sounds easy.
skewed.
I
The
don't know
game
what
is
your problem is.
the game is skewed very heavily in terms of defense, right? Like armor is like 5 auto successes for like regular armor. It's a lot.
Wow. Yeah.
Now, here let's do like burst fire, right? So I got a gun that can shoot multiple shots. Now you'd think this would increase my I don't know accuracy or like my chance of hitting. Maybe it would definitely increase my damage. No, instead I roll once for every shot I make in the burst.
Oh no.
So when I have
How many shots are in a burst?
as many, you can fire as many shots as your gun skill. So if I have gun skill of 7, I can fire 7 shots, but each one is a -7 die penalty unless I have recoil compensation. So in the last fight, we had like 5 characters with machine guns that had 3 recoil compensation. So I was making 15 rolls every time it was my
-2,
turn.
right? Yeah.
Well, at -0 because they had recoil comp. So it was like
Oh, okay.
just piling on all of these extra rolls, and it's like, I mean, that would be for me. I think the very first hack would be to just say burst fire includes. It just makes it easier to hit and causes more damage if you have compensation. If you don't have compensation, it makes it harder to hit but still increases damage. Like that kind of thing. The burst rolls are terrible. They really slow combat down.
Yeah.
Um,
It like from a systemic perspective, it would be worth looking at the average of like how much more damage you gain
Yeah.
when you follow the traditional burst rules, and then just rope that damage into a single roll and be like, nah, we're just modifying it by this much.
The trick is though that like again, because the combat system, you're meant to engage it really hard. There are circumstances they expect the players to be able to say, okay, in this circumstance, my optimum number of shots to fire is 4. I'm going to be at a -1 penalty for all 4. If I was at long range, I would shoot once. Instead, I'm at medium, so I'm going to shoot 4. If I'm at short range, I'm going to shoot 6, but it's a higher penalty, but the target number is lower. So the game expects a lot of it expects
player crunch and engagement.
a lot of
with the
player
rules
crunch,
to
yeah,
optimize,
which
right?
my players do not give a shit about.
Yep.
Um,
It takes a special kind of player to do that.
Sure, and 30 episodes in, they finally know how damage staging works, which is like the core component of like damage, because we've only done combat like 5 times.
It's interesting. I don't actually think we have anybody like that on any of the roleplay shows.
No, well, and people think
there was a guy that I went to college with who was super min-maxy with his characters, and I've never seen anybody. People think Jeff is like that.
Yeah, I was about to say, people think Jeff is like that, but he's not. He's a very like fiction first player.
Nope. There's one.
Oh yeah.
Do you know who I'm thinking of, Adam?
I mean, if it's not me, I don't know who it is.
It's not you. It's Neil.
Yeah. Okay. Well, but that's he's a GM and he's mastered a specific system and is very picky about that system, and that idea spreads to other systems. Yeah, but we don't.
The character that he built for the West Marches it's primo.
Yeah,
it's a really
right?
good D&D character.
Sure. Yeah, and that's a valid method of playing, but it's 1 out of 20, right? Like.
Yeah.
Yeah. But, and this is the thing, is like, people will not engage with a system that is complicated right away. And now, by the time we're at the point where everyone should have engaged with the system, it's just not what they care about. They care about other stuff. They care about their characters' personalities and like the relationships their characters have built. And I want to be able to reward that, right? Like, I want the game to be about that. And I think if it was at the beginning, you know, we would have moved in that direction much earlier, or just started that way. So, yeah, I mean, I guess the thing is here is like looking at streamlining the combat system primarily to help everyone engage in a way that is interesting to them and not like I hate watching like one player be really excited about what's happening and the other 3 be like, okay, like when you're done with your boring thing, like come back to me and I'll tab back into the game and we'll pay attention again.
Yep.
Like I want everyone to care, and I feel like if Bon Bon had some way to influence Crusher's roles by way of their relationship, or was like, if Wheat was like, cool, well, if Crusher fucks up 5 times in this fight, I can be like, God damn it, Crusher, you fucked that up. You're not the boss of the team. This is going to affect our relationship.
Yeah.
Like, that's, to me, a way to get people to buy in. Like, even if, if we're playing a game about characters that are all very disparate in their skill set, I want people to care about their success or failure because I want it to affect them. Because, again, people generally won't give a shit about stuff unless it's a part of the game. So if you're like, hey, cool, if you do this, it's good for me, or it bumps up the, like, team in some positive way, that's what I want. I want to care about it in some serious way. So, yeah, I don't know. Like, I want, again, because the game is about a team, I want team interface to be a part of this. I want to be able to streamline systems that are exclusive, that are like just one person, and I want to be able to have other people buy in or help in ways that aren't just, you're shooting, I'm shooting, we're both shooting, let's shoot, right?
I have a crazy thought to throw out.
Okay.
So, like, characters have relationships with each other. The team maybe is like an entire entity. Like, what if there were some sort of like generation of a relationship-based dice pool that anybody involved in that relationship could use?
Yeah.
And then it's like, okay, Crusher is sucking it up, which means that, like, I, as Bonbon, I'm not able to use that dice pool that I was hoping to use for this other thing.
Team tension is real. I think that, like, yeah, that's very much a thing. Like, there's actually 5 characters in Mirrorshades, right? There's Breakdown, there's Bonbon, there's Night's Ass, there's Crusher, and there's Bomb Threat, right? Like, the team is a character in a way. And I've played with this in various systems. Like, we're working on something like this for Rat Queens. The idea of, like, buy-in, because in a lot of ways, like, Rat Queens is a bit like Shadowrun in that the identity of the team is important too. And there's this weird disconnect in Shadowrun as it stands where in the Shadowrun fiction, what they do is they're like, okay, Mr. Johnson has a job, and the fixer calls somebody on the team, or the fixer assembles the team, and you go on a mission. But because we don't make new characters every fucking mission, it's like, why does the fixer keep calling the same 4 people? What is holding us together, right? And it's nothing, right? So I want a game that, again, is like fits mechanically into that space where it's like, why would Bonbon call everybody together? Why these people? Why do you, like, care about each other enough to, like, pull that together?
Yeah.
So, I mean, I don't know. I want that to reflect in things like combat or decking, where I want Breakdown to be able to be like, I'm going to push myself emotionally. I'm going to make a willpower roll to, like, help Bonbon hold it together during this intense hack, right? Like, I'm going to put my hand on her shoulder and be like, I'm here for you. Like, you can do this, and have that, like, that work, you know?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and it's like, have them interact in the same way that, like, a team of superheroes does, right? Like,
Or, like,
Colossus is a badass and Wolverine is a badass, but the fastball special is super fucking cool.
have you watched Jessica Jones?
I have, yes.
Have you finished it?
I have, but let's try to keep spoilers to a minimum.
Yeah, I'm
'cause it
going
only
to
came
keep
out like
spoilers to the
yesterday.
minimum. I need to look up this character's name. So, let's see. What's his name? Oh, God. Malcolm, the junkie.
Yes.
Right?
Oh, you mean the most attractive dude on the show? Yeah. I know who you're
You
talking
think
about.
so?
He's so handsome.
Man,
And
Luke, though, I don't know, dude.
I don't go for, like, the big beefy dudes like that. Malcolm's adorable.
Malcolm was adorable, especially once he
Well, yes, yeah.
cleaned up a little bit.
Post
Yeah.
junkie Malcolm. Anyway, just
So Malcolm, like, by the end of the show, it was super clear that, like, his role was as, like, an emotional support character, and that was really cool to see.
there's the conversation with where there's a character who's unconscious and there's 2 characters talking about how they're not superheroes. Yeah, like Breakdown is that in Mirrorshades, right? Like,
yeah. So, like, having that be a thing that players can do and have that be an active thing that they can engage in is really cool.
right?
I saw another interesting idea in chat as well, where it's like, okay, this character had a relationship with an NPC. Because it went well, they have an extra pool of, solidarity they can draw on. Or if it went poorly, like, what Breakdown is trying to hack into a thing, and as a result of their poor conversation last night, some of their mental energy is still tied up in that fight they had, and therefore
Again,
it's
hard choices between personal goals and personal action versus the team versus the like support of that stuff, where like, yes, you'll damage your relationship, or if your relationship is already in flux, it makes it harder for you to do your own individual job. I feel like there's a lot of space for that, but I don't know how to move towards that, or like how to, I don't know. I'm at this point now where I almost feel like with Mirrorshades, we need to just, there's two separate projects. There's like shave Shadowrun down so that it's still fun to play in Mirrorshades. It's just like the West Marches, man. Like, make it tolerable and then do a different thing. Like think about a different thing, because it's like, it's hard. It's really hard. It turns out that the game you're playing actually really matters.
Yeah.
So I don't know, like focusing just on how do we make the game, how do we make Shadowrun feel not like, because a lot of people are like, oh cool, hack attack about Mirrorshades, you're gonna fix it and go back to playing Shadowrun for real, right? And I'm like, no, that'll never be this game, right? And when people are like, oh, Crusher's finally starting to act like a real Shadowrunner, good, he's getting the team back in order, I'm like, nope, they will fight him every step of the way, and all it's gonna do is create tension and excitement and interesting stuff for Crusher to butt heads against, right? Like, and that's fun and fine, and it's good. I like the idea that Crusher's embarrassed because everybody's like failing at being a Shadowrunner. Like, that's a cool point of tension for his character, but we're never gonna get back to that place where it's like, put on your black trench coat, everybody, it's Matrix time. Like, it's just kind of how it's happening. So I don't know. I mean, I'd like it to just be like fun and Shadowrunny enough that we're all still getting to explore, like, you know, the world of dragon presidents and, you know, weird magic. But I also feel like there's this other like relationship identity cyberpunk thing that's happening that's very heavily inspired by it, but might not also be that thing. Isolation of mechanics, right? Combat being too much of a focus, decking being too much work for too little payoff for individual characters. What do you think, like, what's a way to build around that? Like, how much can we, without like delving into the system too hard, like, how can I simplify those moments into ways that they still feel visceral and important, but don't take fucking 3 hours to get through?
I mean, like you mentioned something earlier, which I think is a really good starting point, which is like, if the combat is belief-based, then you engage in a richer system. Whereas if it's, you know, unimportant, it's just a one-shot sort of contest between the two sides almost. And you could even abstract it out to like, okay, it's bomb threat versus a gang of mooks, and it's not even Crusher versus a mook, it's bomb threat versus a gang of mooks. Like, so somehow the team decides who's the primary combatant, and maybe that's just always Crusher because he is the primary combatant.
Well, I think,
and then it's like, they roll, maybe people contribute dice to Crusher's dice pool, and then the enemies all roll, and then whoever wins.
It's tough because I think that like I want these like moment to moment things in combat. Like, I like the idea of combat taking a little bit of time to breathe. Like, I almost always abstract like, okay, you bust into the room, there's an unarmed guy, you shoot him. Or like, okay, there's a mage trying to escape and he's down to like one box left. Fuck it, like this, we'll just drag it out. I know how this is gonna end, I don't really care. But in combat, I like the idea of like Crusher is incredibly vulnerable to magic, and I like the balance of being like, Crusher blows some people up, then he gets hit with a spell, Breakdown has to decide whether to protect him or summon a creature. Like, I like that stuff. I like the kind of tension of each moment. But I mean, Bomb Threat always wins or has to run. Like, it always comes down to one or the other, right? They win the fight or they run away, and whether they run away or whether they win, it's about how much it costs them before they get to the next thing. It's very D&D that way.
But you do want to see the moment to moment?
I feel like it's important to see, because I think that tension, a lot of that tension comes from the moment to moment stuff. That like, if we abstracted the whole thing, it would be like, did you win? And here, let's like maybe pick from a list of bad things that happen. Like, I don't know, it's tough.
Well, like, I wonder if, like, I think you're right in that, like, for the important encounters, for the boss encounters, for the encounters the characters really care about, like, it would be good to see the moment to moment stuff. I wonder if there's a way to take less important, non-boss, non-invested encounters and then turn it into what are the consequences within the team.
Yeah.
Like, you know, okay, like, yeah, okay, this encounter is super quick. It's decided by like 2 or 3 dice rolls. But as a result of those dice rolls, we also realize that, you know, Bon is pissed at Crusher.
Yeah.
Or, you know, people don't respect Night Sass. Or, you know,
Yeah.
Breakdown is.
Well,
you know,
I want that
face to
stuff. I
Breakdown.
want that stuff to come from individual roles rather than coming from like, okay, we abstracted combat. Now let's talk about what the combat was like. Like, I want to still experience combat. I want to feel like, okay, you got a bunch of dice, you're gonna roll, and then have like, oh, you only rolled 1 success. Uh-oh. Like, I like that tension. I like the tension of like the moment-to-moment stuff, and I think that
Yeah.
there's a lot of space in there. Ideally, I'd like combat to take like a full. I can see it taking a full hour, like a full in break for a combat. That's a good chunk of time. But I hate the like, okay, well, we're stopping combat to take a break. We're gonna come back and do another hour of this fight.
Yeah.
Um,
Is it just the burst fire that takes up the
it's not just
majority
that.
of time,
It's like the
or-
number of rolls you have to make, and the fact that like okay, here's another thing. Like in D&D, improved initiative gives you a higher time to go in the turn order, right?
Right. And I can hear what you're about to say.
I was gonna say, yeah. So in Shadowrun, improved initiative, the mechanics, that kind of thing improves both how fast you go and how many times you go.
Yep. Yeah.
So instead of being like Crusher, the Mooks, some other person, the rest of the team, it's like Crusher, the Mooks, Crusher, somebody, Crusher.
I mean, you could abstract that into Crusher going 4 times at once, which is slightly more powerful, but it also means that there's less back and forth, which means that Crusher has less to consider. So like the situation doesn't change, you can just act all of the time right now with the same situation around him.
Yeah.
Like that's a way to pare that down if you wanted to. Like you said, like armor. What does armor do?
So armor auto. So basically, you roll when you get hurt. You roll a number of dice equal to your body against a target number based on the weapon. The tougher weapons are harder to resist, right? And to that roll, to your body roll, you add an automatic number of successes based on the armor you're wearing. So Crusher, for example, when hit, I don't think I've ever hit him with a conventional weapon that wasn't like a ballist, like a missile launcher,
Right.
and dealt more than a light wound because he has 9 dice in body and then another 10 dice in armor. Right. So he's rolling 20 dice. So on average, he gets 10 successes, which stages stuff down so far that it's very, very difficult to hurt him.
Yeah. Like, do you want combat to be more deadly? Because
no, see, that's the thing.
that
I don't.
That doesn't sound like that increases the
Death. Like death is a consequence meant for NPCs, right? Like death happens to NPCs. Bummers happen to PCs. You get
This is such a fun conversation because it's entirely the opposite in West Marches.
yeah, right. So like for me, like I think that the Japan fight, the big end of the Japan arc, worked great for me because it was like the consequence here wasn't are you going to win or lose? It's how much do you leave behind? Like, you know, it really fucked up the team. It shook their confidence. Bonbon lost a hand. Breakdown like was captured and like traumatized. There was this whole thing, and that's so much more interesting. People always ask me like, "Well, why don't you kill people more often?" I'm like, a suffering PC is always more fun than a dead one.
Yeah.
Always, like without fail. So
it's just like leprosy.
Exactly, right? And like, this is the thing. Like, people think that kind of stuff is like
Horseshit.
It's hard because it is like but it's fun. Like when I get all like annoyed about something bad happening to my character, I'm like, cool, that's a thing I can like think about and focus on and be like, well, fuck, now I have like a quest, right? Like I can focus.
Play.
Yeah. I can try to unleprosize myself, and now I care about that. That's gonna be my prime objective.
Yeah.
So, you know, it's like killing off characters is just so irrelevant to me in Mirrorshades because how fun is that? Like, what are we going to get? We're going to get, you know, Bonbon's funeral. Great. And Breakdown's going to be sad. And I would rather that happen by having Wheat come to me and be like, I want to play a different character. Let's kill Bonbon. Let's do that. And then I would talk to Breakdown. I'd talk to Dodger about Breakdown and be like, okay, well, like we're going to work into this situation where Bonbon's going to get killed. We're going to like lead up to that. Yeah. Because again, like it doesn't talking about these things and planning for them and stuff doesn't make the game less interesting. We're just choosing what bad things can happen to the character, right? Because really, Bonbon dying is not about Bonbon. Bonbon dying would be about Crusher and Breakdown and Night's Ass, right? So, you know, like, I don't want to make death more likely in combat. I want maiming. I want like choice to be taken away. I want hard choices to be made because you failed a roll. You know, like that's the thing that is interesting to me, is like bad shit happening to characters that isn't just you don't get to play your character anymore.
Yeah. So let's just go down the list of things that are kludgy in combat. Burst fire is kludgy in combat.
Yeah, burst fire, armor is kludgy in combat. Initiative is kludgy, right?
Yep.
That's not fun. Combat doesn't feel like anything happens in it until it's over. Like, people get injured, which makes it more likely they're going to fail. And if they fail, it's more likely that they're going to get injured. And it's a slow slide towards failure, towards like the end game where you lose the fight.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, okay, so here's a way that I could streamline combat in general. We could just say there's only one roll instead of two. There's no attack and resist. There's just attack, dice pool reduced by... Right. But Jesus, I am so not interested in doing the math to make that work. Like, that's the frustrating thing. If somebody wanted to volunteer to tell me how to do that, that'd be cool. But it's really difficult to look at it in terms of success.
It sounds like the resistance roll is their body plus their... auto successes. So like half of their body plus auto successes from armor. So it's just armor plus half body.
Sure, yeah.
And you could just say that's your target number. Right, yeah, on average. And then the rolling makes it swing more. And then if they have dodge, then they can maybe spend that in order to
yeah, so here are the variables in getting shot, right? How hard did you get shot, right? Like, how close did the person shooting at you get to just outright flattening you, right? How good is the shot? That sets your goal for default your armor. That's like a known factor. And then the variable factors are, did you spend dodge pool? Yeah. And how good is your body, basically.
Yeah, I mean, like, I think you could get averaged results by turning that into an armor class for the attacker by just saying your armor class is 50% of your body plus your armor, plus if you want to, you can spend dodge.
But the problem here though is that the person you're attacking has nothing to do. It's so stupid. Nothing to do with how hard it is to hit them.
What?
Yeah. So okay. So if I'm shooting at someone who is like an immobile target, basically. It's just like they're huge and slow. There's not a lot of stuff that affects that, really. Like, when I shoot at somebody, I determine, are they at short, medium, or long range? That's the core. Am I shooting burst? Is there recoil? Do I have any bonuses? Are they behind cover? A bunch of, like, environmental shit. Yeah. But how fast they are, totally irrelevant. That's dodge pool. That's the resist roll.
Yeah.
So the target number that I'm choosing to roll when I attack them, or that I'm rolling when I attack them, is based on all the environmental stuff.
Oh, so sorry. Like, I'm saying it wrong. I'm not saying set a target number for the attacker. Actually, it's that you set a default number of resistances for the defender. You take away the rolling part and just say, the defender has this number of successes, and it's armor plus half of body plus if I want to spend dodge.
Right. Yeah. So we can keep the to hit roll pretty much the same, right? Are they moving? Are you moving? Do they have cover? Whatever. That sets the variable of the environment of the shot. You take the shot, then just reduce the staging by however many successes they normally would have, and then that's it. The problem becomes, actually, I guess it's not a problem, because it's like people who are impossible to hit with normal guns are never going to be possible. Like, if I have an Uzi, I will never hurt Crusher. I just can't. It's impossible. I could fire 9 shots at him, but they're all still 9 shots. They're not... It's just more chance to roll well.
Right.
Okay, cool. That makes sense, I think.
Yeah, I mean, that at least removes half of the rolling from the opposed rolls in combat.
Yeah, so I'll have to work out the math for that. To figure out if that's a plausible thing. But that would cut half the rolling out, just like roll to hit. I would absolutely fucking love to take away or just make burst fire a variable in the to hit and damage pattern. Like,
yes, yes. So like that's from my perspective on that one. That's a bit more dangerous because it sounds like the ramifications of combat effectiveness from burst are not immediately apparent because it adds additional rolls.
It depends on the gun you're using. Like,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Like if you have no recoil compensation, it's a huge gamble to do burst fire unless you have a huge pile of dice, right? Like
Yeah.
a person who just picks up an AK-97 and blasts away with it, recoil compensation ignored, if they only have one die, they'll never do anything with it unless they're firing at an unarmored target, because even then, one success, like if you shoot 10 rounds into somebody and 5 of them hit with one success, they're dead. Like if they're not wearing armor, they're toast. So like burst fire against unarmored targets, and again, it's like all this gun porn, and like I get that it's a part of what the intended goal was, that every Shadowrun character give a shit about this stuff, but I'm not playing that game.
Yeah.
Um,
So like, burst, like, I wonder if we need to look at like how armor interfaces with burst and then have it be like, you roll a number of dice that's increased by this number, and that number of increased dice is decreased by armor.
Yeah, I mean, I think just saying giving someone who's doing burst fire more dice if they have recoil compensation, like you get 1 extra die or 3 extra dice if you do burst fire, and do 3 extra, increase your damage in some way, but if you don't have recoil, it also reduces your. But then again, it makes burst just as effective against armored targets as unarmored.
Right, that's the critical thing here. It sounds like burst interacts differently with the system than just straight up giving them more dice would.
Yeah.
So figuring out a way to say like, okay, when the target has 0 armor, here's what burst does. When the target has 10 armor, here's what burst does. Like, is there a way we can just apply some averaged number to the burst roll and just make it 1 roll?
This is the thing about like game design that I just check out, and I'm like, someone who gives a shit about math, just do this for me.
This is actually exactly what I spend most of my days doing.
Perfect,
these days.
man.
It's like I have spreadsheets where I'm like, okay, let's see.
Here's
If
what's
this
going to
ride
happen.
costs this much and it generates this much per hour, then that means that it has to cost, right? Yeah.
I'm going to open an Excel spreadsheet called Shadowrun Attack Damage Horseshit.
Yep.
.exl or whatever, and I'm going to send it to you, and you're going to answer these questions for me. Well, because it's just like I don't care. Like I feel like all I care about is, what does it mean? What does it mean when you succeed? You know?
Yeah.
And that's
Like,
that's fine. This is why I don't like designing games alone, because I get to this part and I'm like, bleh.
No, you do it. Yeah. This is like kind of like theory crafting, like Space Marines versus Termagants versus Hormagaunts.
Card
It's like,
advantage.
okay,
It's card advantage in Magic the Gathering.
yeah, it's like which weapon do I crit my Space Marines with so that I deal 55% wounds instead of 52% wounds?
Yeah.
Like that's the right choice, even though I only gain 3% effectiveness, and maybe the dice are going to screw me, but yeah. So that's cool. Like that's a solvable math problem.
I think so too. Yeah, and I think that's a way that we can kind of cull a lot of that stuff, because what's happening right now is combat looks like this. Crusher shoots at someone, they blow up and die. A bunch of people shoot at Crusher. They realize Crusher can't be shot at. I shoot at everybody else. Crusher shoots at somebody, they die. Breakdown tries to heal someone. A wizard shoots at Crusher, Crusher almost dies. Breakdown has to heal him. Right?
Yeah.
Like, there's this really weird rock, paper, scissors thing where, like, honestly, because I understand the system well, if I really want to just kill everybody, I could just be like, cool, they attack you with 4 wizards.
Yep.
You're all fucking dead.
Yep.
Right? Like, it's... Yeah, it's tricky, because it's like, what I'm doing here, and there's, you know, chat is asking this, like, I'm not doing this hack for JP, Dodger, Wheat, and Caitlin. This isn't for them. This is for me and for you, audience. Like, I want to make it a more fun experience to watch, and I want to make it more fun for me to GM. I don't think they're going to care either way. And I'm not saying I'm like just going to make up a system and roll it in there. I'm going to make up a system and say, what do you guys think of this? Can we test this in the next fight? And chances are pretty good they're going to be like, whatever.
Sure, whatever. Yep.
JP is going to be like, am I still going to kill somebody every round? And I'm like, yeah, probably. You know, and that'll be it. Like, I'm not taking away any of their abilities.
Yeah. I think actually it is important to recognize that, like I saw Orath saying that,
Yeah.
why are you focusing on this when the characters aren't going to be interested in it, or it's not an area of focus. But the whole point is that because it's not an area of focus for
Right.
the players,
Yeah.
we're trying to make it simpler so that they don't have to focus on it to the extent that they currently
Yeah,
do.
it weighs way too much. No one cares about
Yeah.
it that is actually engaged in it. Like if I said to everybody, I'm like, is combat a fun part of Mirrorshades? Pretty much no one would be like, yes.
Yeah, oh yeah.
Totally. Yeah. So I don't know. I just want to streamline it so that it's like fun and we can get through it quickly, but I don't penalize people for learning it. I want it to still. We're not going to hack it in such a way that like it reduces it down to one role or like takes all the skill stuff away. I just want it to be like fun to play and to watch and like we can move on, but there's still ramifications. Combat is still dangerous. People still get hurt. Like when we come out of a fight, when we come out of combat, we end up in this situation where what I want is for them to be weakened in some way. Someone is slow, someone is hurt, you've lost 2 out of your 3 drones, your gun is jammed, something is broken. And it's like Dungeons and Dragons, right? Like you've run out of hit points and don't have time to recover them all because in this game the alarm is going off. There'll be more guards if you just sit here and wait. It's pressure. It's like small encounters to slow you down and to like run you out of resources. So that when you get to the end encounter you have to make harder decisions. Like this is very clear in the way that spellcasting works. Spellcasting is way more fucking interesting, and I would love to take some stuff from spellcasting and put it into guns and decking, because in spellcasting you choose how hard you want to go, like how ham do you go on this spell, right? And you have the option between piddly crap spell with no risk that probably won't hurt anybody, all the way up to I might die if I cast this.
Yeah.
And
Earth
that's
shattering.
Yeah, that's a really fun choice.
Yeah.
To be able to say you have to make the call, right? Like, do you push yourself hard enough to make this count, and are you willing to deal with the ramifications?
Like that's like I think we've looked at some interesting stuff for like the reducing the opposed roll, for like resolving burst. Armor doesn't really add a whole lot more rolling into combat. It doesn't really slow it down, even though it means that your weaponry is less effective. So maybe there's something to think about there.
Yeah.
It could be the sort of thing where like damage to armor has some sort of like splash damage effect on other parts of the party.
So this is another thing that I would include. I would find ways to for every, like, we're not rolling on armor rolls, but I feel like the armor should get damaged, because right now if you put on a suit of like essentially the game's version of power armor, you can stand in the middle of the room and people can shoot you with machine guns for a million years. Like they'll never hurt you, they'll never hurt your armor will be perfect forever. Like the damage, your armor dice never go down. So I'd like to see that happen. I think that's a mechanism I'd like to include. And I think that would help too, because fights would get worse over time. That you'd come out of the fight and be like, well, I botched 2 rolls or whatever, but there's no roll to connect that to if we average out the armor thing. But anyway, and then also adding different kinds of ammo I think would help in the game, because there's no real like armor piercing ammo in the game.
Right, yeah.
AP ammo would deal less damage, but ignore dice in the action for attacking. Yeah.
Definitely.
Some kind of durability for armor. I think normally I hate that shit in tabletop games, but I actually think it would be kind of like useful in this case.
Let's talk about how you said that there's no real consequences until the very end of the fight, and it's just kind of a slow slide into figuring out that they've lost. Like, how could you punch that up, like, without making it deadly?
I mean, I think that the longer a fight lasts, the more it costs, right?
Yeah. But that also feels like a pretty slow slide, right? It's
sure,
like, okay.
And I'm kind of okay with that. Like, for me, I feel like getting into a fight it's a foregone conclusion that they will either win, because Crusher, again, basically divide the number of opponents by how many turns Crusher gets, and that's how long the fight will take.
Nice.
Right?
Yeah.
Like, fundamentally. Unless but again, the problem is that if I drop Crusher in the first round, if I'm like, cool, Crusher, you get a stun bolt, roll to resist, oh, you're unconscious, then, that's it. That's all you get.
Yeah.
But the problem becomes then, if I do that, then it's an immediate slide into failure, right? The players lose basically instantly.
I mean, what if like, let's brainstorm some other consequences that could happen immediately, but that don't just straight up finish the fight right away. Like, an area of the battlefield becomes impassable due to fire or something like that, right? Like, what other sorts of consequences could we have? Someone gets immobilized.
Yeah, right.
Someone
Well,
gets immobilized. Fire on the field. What other like bad consequences are there?
I mean, I guess that's the thing,
Weapon
right?
jams.
Yeah, like okay, so maybe that's another thing, like consequence of failure. Um, but again, I don't really know how to. I wouldn't know how to introduce those, like,
Yeah.
because the game really, the only bad thing that can happen to you in a fight is you get hurt or somebody else gets hurt.
Mm-hmm.
There's no space to say.
What
You know,
about getting taunted? Like you can't attack any other target next round, or you've got
something like that.
negatives
Yeah,
to
yeah. I definitely think that there would be a space. Yeah, armor damage would fit into that. In a
armor damage. Yep. Or your weapon damage.
yeah.
Like what else? I mean, these are things where it's like, okay, maybe like if the player gets ones, then the GM can step in or the player can say, you know what, I want to spend my ones to turn them into successes by taking these detriments or something like that. Like it's
Yeah.
like, no, I really want to take that guy out, so I want to spend my 2 ones here and purchase that I get immobilized or I'm in a bad spot or
I like the idea of we'd have to figure out a vector for it, but I like the idea of spending non hit point stuff or just causing that kind of damage. Like if a bad guy hits you, like because this is the thing is right now I have no way to challenge my only way to challenge the characters is the same. It's the same in every situation, right? Like I can threaten some of them with bodily harm, I can threaten some of them with magic, and in a combat situation, that's pretty much all I get. And so I'm trying to find a way to do that without kind of supermaning the whole thing every time. To be like,
yeah.
uh-oh, it's kryptonite again. Like, uh-oh, it's a mana bolt again.
Yeah. I mean, yeah. I mean, it feels like the combat system is rock paper scissory enough that maybe within basic Shadowrun you can't really get away from that.
Yeah.
I don't know. Like, is there
the thing.
granularity? Is there granularity enough in the combat rules such that like some weapons are maybe gonna damage Crusher and
Nah.
like some weapons are obviously definitely going to. Someone's definitely
Crusher's
not.
Crusher's a vehicle. He's not even a person. Like I can damage him with vehicle grade weapons, but
Right.
hand to hand, like pistols, rifles, shotguns, sniper rifles, all that stuff, nothing. Just
So
doesn't.
you've got the classic problem of games where like one character is basically impenetrable, and if anybody else gets touched by the same thing, they die.
Total annihilation. Yeah.
Yeah.
So if I was like, and I don't know if this is by design. Like I don't know if all the characters are supposed to be Crusher level. In which case, combat in this game would take forever.
Right.
But like I'm not sure how the intention is. Like I would love to be able to call up the people that made Shadowrun and be like, okay, what is Shadowrun supposed to feel like? Because if everyone's supposed to be Crusher, I have to be like, cool, an attack helicopter with a minigun pulls up and just like hoses all of you. Like they're these like huge fights about very large situations, but it doesn't feel like with a mixed group that's it doesn't feel like that's the intent.
I mean, it kind of feels like we're starting to talk about having combat in Shadowrun go in a way that the current system just doesn't support at all. In that we want narrative consequence over the course of combat that affects players' effectiveness, and not necessarily the player who's targeted, but the team's effectiveness.
Yeah.
And like currently, all we have are mechanisms where a single person's hit points are reduced or not, and that's it. Like, if we were talking outside of the Shadowrun system, I'd be like, I mean, it's almost like the GM gets moves for every failure that the team has, and then it's like that's when the mage earns a new spell that can actually threaten people, or like reinforcements get called in, or someone throws web on Crusher or something like that. But that's not the way that like that's against the old school system that Shadowrun is currently set up on, and also like it does kind of eliminate some of what Crusher is good at, right? Like
Yeah.
he's kind of built to be the guy who just like
Well, Crusher's a glass cannon in the sense that he's like incredibly powerful at killing people, immune to almost all mundane attacks, but so fragile to magic attacks that it's not a challenge, it's a death sentence. Like I can't challenge Crusher with magic without killing him.
Yeah.
And he's the thing you were talking about before about this sort of shared pool and like putting yourself out for your teammates. That happens a little bit because in Magic you can a wizard or a shaman, a mage or a shaman, can use their spell pool to protect someone else. They can grant defense dice, which Breakdown has to do all the time, or Crusher just gets killed by magic. So basically, what I want is a system in which engaging in combat feels dangerous, but not inherently deadly necessarily.
Yeah.
There are ramifications.
I mean, what if it's like, what if we stop looking at the team as individual characters, but instead as the team? And it's like in combat, it's the team that's fighting. And so when magic is used on the team, like, yeah, maybe it hits Crusher, but Bonbon is the one who's putting up the defenses against it.
Yeah, well, and it's kind of like the way that Torchbearer does combat, right? Where you're fighting as a team. The team has hit points, but each individual person takes individual action. So it's like
and contributes. Yeah.
Well, or like looking at the initiative as everyone rolls, but they're just empty spots, and you fill those spots with different players. Yeah. And then once everyone's had a turn, you fill it with another person who's like, did they get a second one?
Yeah.
Which actually would help split it up, and it would still make the initiative thing more interesting. So it would be like, okay, so slot number 1 is a PC slot. Slot number 2 is an NPC. Then we have 2 PC slots, an NPC slot, another 2 PC. Like, you have more than them because you're all faster as a team.
Right.
And then they could be like, cool, Crusher's going to shoot. Then Night's Ass is going to sneak up so she can shoot on the next one. She's going to lay down some covering fire for Bonbon to place the bomb. Breakdown's going to cast a spell. We're going to go back to Crusher. Then it'll go Night's Ass. But then this time we're going to Breakdown again. So this, like, rotating, like, space.
Yep. And then it's like, and then it, like that whole thing where it's like, if Night's Ass gets shot with a sniper rifle, she's dead. Whereas if Crusher gets hit with a mana bolt, he's dead. But it's like, it's like, you know, the mage is throwing a mana bolt in the direction of the team. And then it's like, yeah, maybe it hit Crusher, but there are people nearby, there are relationships around that help mitigate that. But it reduces some overall team coherency.
Well, and I mean, they could spend points or something like hit location in Burning Wheel. I say, okay, I'm taking a swing at you. And you choose where I hit you. So you're like, cool, well, I got a breastplate on. You hit me in the chest. I'm like, okay, well, I'm going to spend 2 of my hit successes to move that to your face, but not upgrade the damage. Oh, you get hit in the face, but less hard than you would if I hit you in the chest. We could do that on a team level and say, okay, the enemy team shoots a mana bolt at us. Players, I'm targeting Crusher. And then they could, I say, who's eating it? And then I'm like, cool, well, I'll spend 3 of my successes to move it to, somebody weaker, to move it to Crusher, right? They're like, no, you hit Breakdown. I'm like, well, okay, a weaker version of the spell hits Crusher.
So this is not accomplishing our goal of making it simpler, but you could have some sort of asymmetrical bidding war. And I'm thinking, actually, I'm pulling this from Netrunner, for those of you in chat who play that. So in Netrunner, when the corp runs a trace on the runner encounters the trace subroutine, which has a strength. Let's say it's strength 3. So the trace is strength 3. That's compared to the runner's link. Runners generally have 0 link. The corporation can choose to bid to increase the strength of the trace by spending credits.
Right.
And then if the runner spends credits to match the strength of the trace, then the trace fails. But if the trace is stronger than they have, then the trace succeeds. So you could do something crazy like, okay, I'm aiming at Crusher, and my aim has a strength of 3. Do you guys want to spend resources? Or like, I'm going to spend my GM resources to make my aim better, but that's taking permanent resources away. But then you also have resources you can spend to make my aim worse.
So, I mean, I guess this is the thing. Like, I like the idea of spending, like, rolling a pool of dice to hit somebody and assigning successes to certain things.
Yeah.
So, like, I got 10 successes. I can spend, I don't know, that's an insane number, but let's pretend it's Crusher. I got 10 successes. I'm going to spend 5 of them on armor reduction and 5 of them on damage improvement.
Yeah.
Right? So I hit you in a place that is less armored and I deal more damage. This would help make combat faster, certainly, because then you're able to do smaller hits to better areas. We could tie karma into that to say, to, like, you just buy successes with karma to help you, because that already happens. You could buy an additional success to, like, move stuff around or target different stuff. I don't know how much I want to abstract it into, like, two teams fighting, but I also think that, like, yeah, I think there is room for that because the game does set precedent with the spell pool thing. Yeah. Well, it's funny because there is a lot of this other stuff where, like, if I did redesign or design a game from the ground up, a lot of this stuff would tie into the idea of relationships and, like,
exactly,
all that
like, that's
shit.
where the team pool would be based on their relationships and the current strength.
Yeah, we're not trying right now. We're not trying to make a perfect situation. That's another game that I definitely am thinking about. But this situation is, how do we make Shadowrun better for what we're doing with it without having to introduce a whole nother game? Because games take a long ass time, and I want to keep playing Mirrorshades. I would just like to have more fun playing Mirrorshades with. And again, people are like, "Well, why are you focusing on all the combat stuff?" Because everything else is fine.
Yeah, we just want to make the
combat and decking are slow and not fun. Like they don't deserve as much attention as we give them. So we're spending a bunch of time now to spend less time on them later. Yeah.
Cool. Well, I think we've talked about some fairly interesting first shot solutions to reducing some of the kludge there.
Well, and that's the thing. We're not going to fix it all in 2 hours, but I certainly like to take away from this. I like the idea of trying to find a way mechanically to average out defense rolls. That feels important to me. The idea of potentially reducing someone's ability to defend themselves in combat by expending some of your dice, because that ties right into the staging thing. And I like the idea of trying to find a way to help the characters interact with each other in combat in a more direct way. Because I think that if you watched the last episode of Mirrorshades, I really liked the space where I had to make, like, Breakdown had to choose what to do with the spell pool, whether to protect Crusher or not.
Yeah.
Hard choices, right? Hard choices are my fucking bread and butter for role-playing games. So more of those are better.
Yeah, there's something about, like, maybe abstracting that spell pool into, like, an action pool or a focus pool, and it's like you can spend it entirely on offense or entirely on defense, or different people can split it different ways. I don't know. Interesting thoughts there.
Grouping some of the pool stuff I think is useful. I don't know. I think there's a lot of cool stuff that we can brainstorm around this. And again, the first episode of Hack Attack is never the last episode, so there's lots more work to be done.
Definitely.
Cool. Well, thanks for coming and hanging out and giving me some assistance on this. I will call on you again.
Super rad.
Yeah, I'm gonna take it away and make some notes and sort of let my brain percolate about this and think about how it interacts with this other sort of proto design that I'm coming up with to do all the, like, relationship stuff. And I guess we'll see how it goes when we get back to Mirrorshades. And I also want to take some of this stuff to the players and be like, so how do you feel about this stuff? Because my ultimate goal, again, is to make Mirrorshades more streamlined so we can focus on the fun stuff but still reward the players who like doing the combat stuff, i.e. JP. But also to think about a better game, another game that may not exist that does some Mirrorshades-y stuff more intuitively from the ground up. So there's kind of two things going on here. So,
yeah.
Cool.
This is fun. Game design is fun. I like making
game design is fun. So I guess if folks have thoughts, and if chat is any indication, they definitely do.
Always.
Yeah. If people have thoughts about the stuff we've talked about today, I think probably, like, Twitter is a good place to get at us about that. I'll start a thread over on my subreddit about today's episode of Hack Attack, so you can get that nice. Going if you want to talk there. And then also, if you're watching this, we're putting together I've got a Discord server now, and one of the channels on it is game design. So if you're interested in talking with people about game design, you can check that out as well. So I think that's it for today. Steven, you've been doing some game design of your own. I actually want you to tell me about this. It's not just like tell people about this, but tell me about your Twitch designs a game thing. We talked about it a little bit the other day.
Yeah,
but
Twitch makes games.
Yeah,
So
tell me about that.
it's less game design right now and more coding and learning the integrated development environment of Unity. But yeah, so like about 6 weeks ago, I started Twitch Makes Games. So if you don't know who I am, I'm Silent0siris. I do a lot of stuff with Adam and with JP and with stuff around the internet. And I'm also a streamer, so you can come over to my stream and take a look at that sometime. And one of the streams that I do is Twitch Makes Games. So about 6 weeks ago, I put out the call for ideas from the Twitch community. We played a bunch of really tiny little itty bitty games, and I said, I'm going to make a game like this. What game should I make? And the game that was suggested and voted on by the chat and by the community was a game where you are an artificial intelligence in a space station, and you're sorting minds that you have stored in your cloud data banks into bodies that you have in your cryo storage. And you're trying to...
It's so good. Like I when I read that, I was like, huh. Because somebody was talking about it on Discord, and I was like, huh. This doesn't sound like total bullshit. I might actually be into this. This is kind of a cool idea. And they like... The idea of them being like, yeah, we're not going to give you any like real information, like I'm body number A7574. It's like, let's just have some weird fractured memories.
Yep. That's what it's going to be. We're going to develop some clues that sort of point you in the direction of which body would be best for this mind, and then you have to sort of choose, and then like we're probably going to rate you on like effectiveness or something like that. Like the crew that you've reactivated is 85% effective or whatever. Yeah, so like right now for the past couple weeks, it's just been me slogging through learning how to code in C# and make it all work the right way. But now we actually have a row of buttons that represent minds, a row of buttons that represent bodies. You can select a mind and a body, you can merge them, and you get a message that says it was successful or it was a failure. That's the most basic first pass implementation of the game design for that. And then from there, we're going to go in the direction of what I was just talking about with clues, and with like the mind and body will disappear once you've merged them, and it'll contribute to your overall effectiveness, things like that. So if you're curious about independent games development, you should definitely follow my stream. Other than that, I'm pretty curious about this Rainbow Six Siege that's coming out pretty soon, so I'll probably pick that up and be playing it some. So
I will definitely not play that. I'm so bad at those games.
Yeah.
Cool. I'm glad you're streaming more. It's nice to see content going up. You're one of the few people that I was like, nope, definitely gonna subscribe. Got to get on that.
Well, thank you.
You're welcome. It's fun. It's one of those things that's funny because it really just works out great for Twitch, and I'm like, cool.
Yep.
Well, that's fine. Yeah, so if you want to see cool game design stuff, follow Steven, Silent0siris on Twitch, and you can follow me right here if you haven't already. And,
Definitely do.
Yeah,
Definitely
we're both big game design nerds. So thanks for coming and witnessing us nerd about game design. I'm not sure when the next Hack Attack will be, but once we're on a roll, we're usually on a roll. So I'll consult the Steven, and we'll figure out another time that we'll play the game design game. So thanks for coming, everybody. Hope you had a good time. Before we go, I just wanted to special thanks to Fool Inc. for our badass intro outro graphic, which you are about to take a look at right now. Have a good time. Bye, everybody.
Bye-bye.